The icy wind of Christmas Eve in Boise, Idaho, bit at my face, a cruel welcome. My heavy boots sank into the untouched snow blanketing the yard of my daughter's house. Years of taekwondo, of pushing limits from sweltering dojos to harsh winters, had hardened me, I thought. Yet this cold, this particular cold, sliced right through. Through the grand picture window, a golden warmth spilled out, painting the snow with inviting light. Jingle bells, Emily's childhood favorite, drifted on the air from a Bluetooth speaker, a cheerful sound that felt wrong. I peered inside. A long table draped in festive red groaned under the weight of a holiday feast. A golden roasted turkey, steaming cornbread stuffing, cranberry salad studded with glistening apples, and wine glasses catching the light like rubies. The Whitlocks, my son-in-law Ryan's family, were all there. Harold Whitlock, Ryan's father, held court with an air of entrenched authority. Evelyn, his mother, had a smug, knowing smile fixed on her lips, a glass of champagne in hand. Abigail, Ryan's sister, cackled with her 2 young children, all raising their glasses in a toast by the crackling fireplace. But where was Emily? A knot tightened in my gut. I'd pictured her radiant smile, her familiar embrace, the joy of a surprise reunion after months apart. A faint whimper, barely a breath, reached me over the cheerful music. It came from the porch, an almost imperceptible sound that turned my blood to ice. My heart slammed against my ribs. There, tucked beside a snow-laden poinsettia planter, Emily was curled in an old wooden chair, just a thin blouse, her frail shoulders shaking violently. Her hair, damp from melting snow, stuck to her forehead. Emily! The word tore from my throat raw with panic. I ripped off my heavy coaching jacket and threw it around her, my trembling fingers brushing her arm. It was colder than the air, colder than the snow, as if warmth had utterly abandoned her. She lifted her face, eyes red-rimmed, her pale lips barely forming a whisper that dissolved into the frigid air. Mom! Then she collapsed into my arms. I clung to her, feeling her tiny body convulse like a bird caught in a sudden storm. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here, I choked, pulling an extra sweater from my bag and wrapping it around her, desperate to share my own heat. I lifted her, her soaked slippers falling into the snow, leaving a trail of damp earth. Her weak breath tickled my neck, a fragile pulse against my skin. All I wanted was to spirit her away, far from the biting cold, far from whatever had brought her to this agonizing state. But from inside, the laughter swelled again, careless and cruel. I heard Ryan's voice, loud and boastful, followed by the clinking of glasses, a chilling counterpoint to my daughter's suffering. They were cozy, safe by the fire, while Emily, my own flesh and blood, shivered on the edge of their warmth, unwanted, unheard. Just hours before, the scent of the dojo still clung to me, a warm memory from a week coaching the national taekwondo team. At the Boise airport, dragging my seasoned suitcase, anticipation thrummed through my veins. Emily's face, lighting up as she saw me, was the only Christmas present I desired. My heart raced, a drumbeat of longing. Since she was a tiny girl, clinging to my legs for one more bedtime story, she had been my light. Her smile, even now, could melt away the toughest days. My job demanded constant travel Seattle, national tournaments, but I always promised myself, just one more, then I'll be with her. And now, here I was, ready for a reunion I vowed would erase every moment of absence. In the waiting area for my ride to the Boise suburbs, I pulled out my phone, eager to hear her voice. The ringing stretched, each tone tightening a spring inside me. No answer. Perhaps she was deep in Christmas preparations with the Whitlocks. I called again, then again. Each time, silence. A cold unease crept in, spreading like a stain. "Mom's on her way. You home?" I texted, staring at the screen, waiting for the little blue check mark. Nothing. I tried to dismiss the growing dread, convinced she'd just misplaced her phone or was busy decking the halls. The plane had landed in the dark. Stepping out of the airport, the sharp winter cold pierced me. Families embraced, laughter echoing, eyes fixed on midnight mass anticipation. A father carried his giggling daughter, candy cane in hand. I watched them, a lump in my throat. I had carried Emily like that once, walked hand in hand through streets festooned with lights. Now I was alone, pulling a heavy suitcase, an inarticulable loneliness pressing down. "Meadow Creek, 12th Street," I told the taxi driver, my voice hoarse with fatigue. Traffic crawled, the streets alive with bundled figures heading toward warmth and worship. I stared out at the glowing windows of homes, distant church bells faint, harmonizing with a choir practicing Silent Night. A small smile touched my lips, picturing Emily in the kitchen, carefully mashing potatoes, just as I'd taught her. At an intersection, a group of officers directed traffic. Among them, I recognized Jake, a former Taekwondo student from the community center. He stood tall in his uniform, radiating confidence, yet his smile was still the same kind, familiar. "Jake!" I shouted, rolling down the window. His eyes widened in recognition. "Miss Rose, you're back!" he exclaimed, adjusting his police cap. I returned his smile, trying to mask my exhaustion. "Yeah, just finished training in Seattle. Still in Boise?" He nodded, his bright smile unwavering. "Yep, traffic cop now. Here for Christmas with family?" "With Emily," I said, a warmth spreading through me at the mention of her name. But Jake's smile faltered. His face froze. A flicker of something doubt, worry passed through his eyes, as if words were caught in his throat. A spark of dread ignited within me. "What's wrong, Jake? Something up?" I pressed, my voice low now, insistent. He shook his head, a forced smile returning. No, it's nothing, Ms. Rose. Just glad you're back." But his eyes betrayed a deeper concern. I wanted to question him further, but the light changed. The taxi surged forward, leaving Jake watching from the street, his hand gripped tightly on the brim of his cap. As we neared Emily's house, I asked the driver to stop just short of the gate. I wanted to surprise her, to see the pure joy on her face. My boots crunched through the snow, leaving deep tracks, the golden glow from surrounding houses reflecting like scattered candlelight. A guitar and singing drifted from Emily's living room. I smiled, picturing her as a child, belting out Winter Wonderland with that clear, sweet voice. I left my suitcase on the step, took a deep breath, and raised my hand to knock. But then a mocking laugh, sharp as a knife, sliced through the quiet night. I froze, my hand hung in the air, inches from the door. Harold Whitlock's deep, gruff voice boomed clearly. "That's what they call a daughter-in-law? A woman who can't even have kids. 4 miscarriages. Haven't they embarrassed us enough?" His laugh was heavy, dripping with contempt. Then Ryan's voice, cold and cruel, always faking depression, locking herself in her room to do nothing. If it weren't for my parents, I'd have kicked her out ages ago. Another wave of laughter, punctuated by the clinking of wine glasses. Abigail, Ryan's sister, chimed in, her tone venomous. "Yeah, totally useless. A wife who can't have kids. What's she good for? Pathetic. Pretending to be sick just to get coddled." Each word was a dagger twisting in my heart. I stood there, paralyzed, my breath seizing in my throat. This was how they treated my Emily, my daughter, who had dreamed of a happy family, who poured her heart into every meal for her husband. Now they were humiliating her, dismissing her pain, her 4 miscarriages that had left her sobbing until no tears remained during our phone calls. They called it faking. My fists clenched, nails digging into my palms, leaving crescent-shaped marks against my skin. The sight of Emily curled on the porch in a thin blouse, her head bowed and body trembling in the Boise chill, stole my breath. Tears blurred my vision, and my heart hammered against my ribs. I scooped her into my arms. Her small frame was rigid, cold as ice. My hands shook, not just from the bitter night air, but from the raw fury that ignited in my chest. Each step toward the Whitlock's door was weighted with 1,000 pounds, yet I pressed on. My fist hammered against the wood, a percussive counterpoint to the relentless loop of Christmas music blaring from inside. Jingle bells, mocking the agony I held. No one answered. I gritted my teeth and pounded harder, imagining the door splintering beneath my rage. Finally, it swung open. Mrs. Evelyn Whitlock stood framed in the doorway, a glass of red wine wobbling precariously in her hand. Her lips, painted a stark, glossy crimson, stretched into a smile that tasted of artificial sweetness and cheap perfume. "Why, Miss Rose?" she drawled, her voice syrupy thick. "What a surprise! We'd have rolled out the red carpet if you'd called ahead." I met her eyes, the fury simmering in mine too potent to conceal. "Called ahead?" I hissed, each word a shard of ice. "If I'd called ahead, I wouldn't have seen this. What did you do to my daughter?" I clutched Emily tighter, her faint, shallow breaths against my shoulder, fueling the fire within me. Evelyn raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, her gaze flicking to Emily with a flicker of annoyance, as if my daughter were an inconvenience. "Emily just needed some fresh air," she said, her tone soft, but laced with a cutting disdain. "It's Christmas. Don't make a scene. Come in, out of the cold." Her words were a physical blow, a brazen lie when Emily shivered, half frozen, in my arms. Before I could retaliate, Ryan appeared behind his mother, his shirt half unbuttoned, an aura of deliberate nonchalance about him. He held a wine bottle, his chin jutted out in a defiant challenge. "Mom, close the door," he snarled, his voice thick with arrogance. "Let her stay out there until she gets over it. Who shows up to Christmas dinner acting fragile to avoid helping?" He let out a condescending chuckle, as if he'd delivered a profound witticism. The words were a fresh knife twist, not just for me, but for Emily, who seemed to shrink further into herself. From the dining table, Abigail's voice cut through the air, sharp and venomous. "Exactly. A woman who can't even carry a baby to term. What use is she?" Her cackle merged with the murmurs of other family members. Then Emily's cousins, Abigail's children, bounded onto the porch, their innocent faces alight with curiosity. They giggled, pointing at Emily in my arms. "Aunt Emily's in trouble." Their childish voices were salt in an open wound. My face burned with a rage so fierce it stole my breath. I rammed my shoulder into the door, then kicked it with all my might. The wood slammed against the wall, the bang echoing through the house, silencing every snickering voice, every jingle bell. Evelyn's wine sloshed, crimson droplets staining the expensive rug like fresh blood. The Christmas music died, abruptly, as if a plug had been violently yanked. The air in the room grew heavy, suffocating, all oxygen stolen by the sudden shift. I stepped into the center of the living room, Emily still in my embrace. Each footfall left a dark, melted print on the polished hardwood, a trail of raw fury. All eyes were on me. Mr. Harold Whitlock, his face a mask of cold judgment. Evelyn, her forced smile dissolved into a sneer. Abigail, her gaze dripping with disdain. The rest of the family stared, a blend of shock and resentment. Their hostility radiated, palpable, yet I felt nothing but a hard, cold resolve. Gently, I settled Emily onto the couch, draping my scarf over her shoulders. Her hands were still icy, trembling like the spectral dance of snowflakes. I knelt, searching her haunted eyes, willing strength into her, even as my own heart raged. The Whitlocks' opulent living room, still blazing with festive lights, felt instead like the antechamber to an explosion. Ryan stepped closer, his face flushed with wine, his eyes glinting with a dangerous arrogance. He lowered his voice, but the smugness remained. "You don't get to make a scene in my house, Rose," he emphasized, my. His lip curling, a subtle reminder of my perceived outsider status, his shirt still unbuttoned, a pose of defiant contempt. Yet a flicker of uncertainty crossed his eyes. He knew I was no easily intimidated woman. I sprang to my feet, my finger jabbing at his chest, my voice trembling with a contained violence. "No," I snapped. "And you? You think you have the right to throw my daughter out into the freezing cold? To let her nearly die?" My blood boiled. "Is that what you call a husband? Is that what you call family?" My gaze swept across the banquet table, laden with steaming food, wine glasses sparkling, a grotesque feast mocking Emily's suffering. Mr. Harold Whitlock slowly rose from the head of the table, adjusting his suit jacket, his deep voice resonating with authority. "That's enough, Ms. Rose," he commanded. "This is a family matter. A woman who can't bear children needs to learn to endure. That's just how it is." His words hit me like a sledgehammer, chilling me to the bone. I met his gaze, seeing the ingrained arrogance of a man accustomed to absolute control, a former judge who had always delivered the final verdict. But today he had made a fatal misjudgment. My eyes swept from the untouched feast, the roasted turkey, the perfectly arranged cornbread, the glittering wine, then back to Emily, still shivering on the couch, her stomach letting out a faint, painful growl. I could no longer hold back. My voice erupted, sharp and lacerating. "So you feast while my daughter is outside in 32-degree weather? No coat, no food. That's what you call tradition? That's what you call humanity?" Evelyn shrugged, her earlier icy smile returning. "A woman who can't have kids, even if she eats, is just a waste," she murmured softly, her voice dripping with disdain. She raised her wine glass, taking a deliberate sip, a clear gesture of her utter disregard. Abigail chimed in from the table, her tone as acidic as ever, rubbing salt into the wound. "Your daughter always uses depression as an excuse to avoid work. Has she ever cooked a decent meal for the family? All she does is lie in bed whining, dragging everyone down." She shook her head, her eyes full of venomous mockery, as if Emily were a cancerous growth on the Whitlock lineage. The murmurs around the table grew, a chorus of agreement, some nodding, others snickering. Each sound, each sidelong glance was a fresh stab to my heart. I wanted to overturn the table, to smash every crystal goblet, to demand justice. Then a faint voice from the couch. "Emily," she stirred, trying to sit up, her trembling hands gripping the edge of the cushion. "I'm so tired," she stammered, her voice barely audible, breaking. "No one understands." Her words were instantly crushed by Ryan's shout. "Enough!" he barked, stepping toward her, his gaze icy, as if to shatter the last vestiges of her strength. "Shut up. You've embarrassed me enough already." I watched Emily's shoulders slump, her red eyes filling with fresh tears, and a fierce protective instinct ignited within me. I stepped in front of her, a shield ready to face him. Memories flooded my mind. Emily's tearful phone calls after each failed pregnancy, the shattered pieces of her soul with every miscarriage, the first, the second, the third, the fourth. She had been a sweet girl, dreaming of a warm home, family dinners, children of her own. The relentless pain had pushed her to the brink. I'd tried to be there, even across the miles, but I had never imagined the Whitlocks, the family I'd entrusted her to, would treat her like this. Ryan, my son-in-law, a man I'd once thought decent, now stood exposed, a cruel bully who cast her out, treating her like garbage. I was teetering on the edge. Through the window, I saw Jake. He stood on the porch, a silent sentinel, his hard gaze and clenched fists suggesting he had heard, had witnessed. I gave him a subtle nod, a signal to hold back. Not yet. But his presence was a lifeline, a glimmer of hope. I was not alone. I had a witness, someone who knew the truth. Ryan took another step, stripping away any pretense of politeness. "I'm warning you, this is my house," he snarled. "Stay out of it, or things will get worse." He smirked, confident in the Whitlock power, certain I would back down. He was dead wrong. My knuckles cracked as I clenched my fists, embodying all the bottled rage of a lifetime. The air in the room was so thick, a single spark could set it ablaze. I locked eyes with Ryan, my voice low, but sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. "You think you can threaten me? You think you can keep hurting my daughter without paying a price? You're wrong, Ryan. I'm not letting this go." I turned my gaze to the entire Whitlock clan, from Mr. Harold's cold stare to Evelyn's faint smirk to Abigail's disdainful glare. "All of you," I announced, my voice echoing in the sudden terrifying silence. "You are going to pay for what you did to Emily." The Whitlock living room held its breath, a terrifying vacuum of silence, heavy with explosive tension. I placed my hand on Emily's fragile shoulder, feeling her shiver beneath the scarf, my voice now steady and unwavering. "This isn't a private matter anymore. This is domestic abuse." The words landed like stones in a still lake, sending ripples of shock through the opulent room. Evelyn, a predatory smile playing on her lips, swirled her wine, the ruby liquid mirroring the contempt in her eyes. "Abuse?" she scoffed, her voice an acidic whisper. "We're merely teaching her her place, Rose. You should be thanking us for putting up with her this long." Ryan, his face flushed, eyes burning with a drunken fury, lurched forward. Each word he spat tasted like venom. "She fakes depression, fakes pain, a parasite. Nobody's hitting her. We're just sick of her uselessness." He paused, a cruel grin twisting his features as he stared at me. "Teach your daughter again, Rose. Nobody loses 4 pregnancies in a row. Maybe she did it on purpose." A razor blade. That's what his words were. They didn't just cut my heart. They tore open Emily's unhealed wounds. A sharp gasp escaped her lips, as if she'd been physically struck. 4 miscarriages. 4 times she'd called me, sobbing, her voice a fractured echo of despair, confessing she'd lost the children she would never hold. Each time I clutched the phone, helpless, miles away, offering hollow comforts, and now Ryan dared to suggest it was her own doing. My fists clenched, nails digging crescent moons into my palms, blood rushing to my face. He had crossed a line, a chasm of unforgivable cruelty. I yanked my phone from my coat pocket, fingers trembling but resolute, and dialed the precinct. "I'm calling the cops," I announced, my voice an icy sheath over the hurricane raging within. "A report will be filed. You'll answer to the law." Each syllable was chiseled into the air, a declaration of war. Ryan froze. The wine bottle slipped from his grasp, shattering on the polished hardwood, dark crimson blooming across the pristine rug. Panic flickered in his eyes, quickly masked by a forced bravado. "You wouldn't dare," he bellowed, though his voice cracked like a weak branch. Mr. Harold, who had observed the scene with chilling detachment, stepped forward, adjusting his tie. His voice, deep and gravelly, boomed with the authority of years spent on the bench. You have no idea who you're challenging, Rose. I've spent my life in courtrooms. I've seen the worst humanity has to offer. You think a phone call will make us tremble? His gaze, sharp as obsidian shards, reminded me the Whitlocks were not easily swayed, but I had seen Emily shivering in the cold, and neither his power nor his threats would silence me. From the table, Abigail crossed her arms, a mocking smile twisting her lips. Go ahead, Miss Rose, she taunted. Make the call. Let's see who they believe, a crazy old lady or a respected family like ours. You think the police will side with you? Her venomous laugh echoed, confident in my defeat. Emily, still on the couch, tugged at my sleeve, her voice a faint whisper of terror. Mom, please don't. I just want peace. Her red-rimmed eyes, wide with fear, pleaded for an end to the torment. My heart ached. I knew her fear, understood her dread of the Whitlocks' retaliation, of more humiliation piled upon her aching spirit. But I also knew that if I stopped now, Emily would remain forever trapped in this cage. I squeezed her hand tightly, pouring my courage into her. You don't have to be afraid, I said, quiet but firm. I'll protect you, I promise. I lifted her into my arms. Snow from her clothes dusted the rug like shattered dreams. I ignored the Whitlocks' scornful glares, their muttered threats. All that mattered was getting her out, away from this cruelty. As I turned to the door, I saw Jake through the frosted glass, standing on the porch, hand resting on his radio, his eyes burning with an unspoken promise. I gave him a small nod, a silent signal that the fight had begun. He nodded back, his grip on the radio a silent vow of loyalty. I walked out, not looking back. Behind me, Evelyn's shrill voice ordered the housekeeper to clean the spilled wine. Ryan's fist slammed against the table, a guttural curse following. Then, Mr. Harold's deep, furious voice as he barked into his phone. Each sound was an arrow, but I felt nothing but purpose. I took Emily to my small apartment near the National Training Center, a place I'd called home for years as a coach. It wasn't grand, just a living room, with an old couch, a humble kitchen, a few faded family photos. But to me, it was a sanctuary, a shield against the Whitlocks' venomous ice. I carried Emily to her room, settling her gently on the bed. She was still trembling despite the thick coat bundled around her. I found an old, soft sweater in the closet, eased it onto her, then made hot cocoa, its sweet aroma a fragile comfort in the chilly air. Drink this, sweetheart, I whispered, placing the mug in her hands. But her eyes remained vacant, as if warmth itself was a kindness she didn't deserve. My phone rang, slicing through the heavy silence. It was Jake. His voice, deep and steady, was a lifeline. Ms. Rose, I filed the initial report, but the Whitlocks won't go down easily. You know their influence. I'm ready to testify. His resolve was a flickering flame, unyielding. Jake, my former student, once a bright-eyed boy in the dojo, now stood by my side in a different kind of battle. Help me prepare, Jake, I said, my voice brief but steeped in gratitude. This could be a long fight. He replied simply, I got it, Coach. I'm here. The next morning, I took Emily to Dr. Linda Carter, a kind-faced woman with a gentle gaze in a cozy downtown Boise office. After speaking with Emily, Dr. Carter turned to me, her voice heavy with sorrow. She's suffering from severe depression, Miss Rose. 4 miscarriages, compounded by constant degradation from her in-laws, have shattered her. She paused, her gaze holding mine. She needs rest, treatment, and above all, to feel safe. I nodded, a fresh stab of pain piercing my heart. I knew Emily wasn't well, but hearing it articulated, clinical and stark, was a fresh wound. I looked at her, curled in the armchair, her hands clasped tight, and hated myself for not being there sooner. That afternoon, Jake appeared at the apartment, out of uniform, carrying a bag of fruit and a stack of old cookbooks. He placed them before Emily, hesitant. "I know you like cooking," he offered softly. "Thought maybe starting small, like a pie or some chicken noodle soup, might make you feel better." His worry was palpable. Emily lowered her head, clutching the edge of her blouse. "Thanks," she murmured, "but I don't think I can do anything anymore." Her words were needles in my chest. Jake's face clouded for a moment, but he didn't press. He just nodded quietly, left the bag, and turned to me. "Ms. Rose, whatever you need, just say it. I've got your back." That night, after Emily finally drifted to sleep, I sat at the kitchen table beneath the solitary glow of a dim lamp. A subtle scrape at the door, then a thick envelope slid silently across the floor, a quiet menace. Inside, a handwritten note, the letters crude and aggressive. "Don't mess with the Whitlock family if you don't want to end up as miserable as your daughter. Give up." My blood boiled. I crumpled the paper, throwing it into the trash with a sharp, defiant tear. Their threat ignited, rather than extinguished, my resolve. They thought I'd back down. They were wrong. That same night, I began to organize years of financial support to Emily. Bank receipts, messages filled with loving notes. Each scrap of paper was not just a record of my help, but a painful testament to her suffering. Ryan and his family had squandered most of it. I remembered her shaky phone calls, wanting to buy something small for the house, only for Ryan to deny her. My grip tightened on the pen until it nearly snapped. I had trusted Ryan, believed he would care for my daughter. Instead, he saw her as a disposable tool. In the dead of night, Emily awoke. She stumbled out of her room, legs trembling, and found me at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, my eyes weary but alight with fierce determination. "Mom," she whispered, her voice fragile, "I'm scared they'll do something to you." I looked up, saw the fear in her eyes, felt my heart clench. I rose, walked to her, and pulled her into my arms, feeling her small, fragile body shake. "You don't have to be afraid," I said, my voice firm despite the knot of nerves inside. "From now on, I will protect you from everything, I promise." I tucked her back into bed, staying until her breathing evened out. But sleep eluded me. I returned to the table, sorting papers, drafting lists. I called an old lawyer friend who'd once helped me with a case for the taekwondo team. He promised to look into it, but his warning hung heavy in the air. "The Whitlocks have a lot of pull in Boise, Miss Rose. They know people in the courts. Be ready for a long fight." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I know," I said, "but I'm not stopping." The weeks of preparation were an endless nightmare. Every night under the dim lamp, I reviewed page after page, rereading every bank receipt, every grim medical report. These cold numbers and letters were proof of my unwavering love, but also a stark, painful reminder of everything Emily had endured. Finally, the first day of the trial arrived. I felt like I was stepping onto a taekwondo mat, though the arena was the austere Boise courthouse. The morning chill seeped through my thick coat as I held Emily's hand, her icy fingers trembling within my own. Her eyelids, delicate as bruised petals, struggled to hide the stark crimson of sleepless nights, ringed by shadows that clung like old grief. She kept her head down, a small shield against the towering, unforgiving steps before us. I tried to stand tall, a fortress for her crumbling form, but inside, a tremor echoed hers. "I'm here," I whispered, my fingers seeking purchase on her cold hand. She gave a fragile nod, but her eyes, vacant as empty rooms, spoke of a fight surrendered long ago. The Whitlock family, a formidable phalanx, had claimed their territory early. Ryan molded into a crisp gray suit, moved with the predatory grace of a seasoned lawyer, even before the gavel fell. He adjusted his tie, his gaze slicing through the hushed air like a scornful blade, landing on us with calculated precision. Beside him, Mr. Harold, a man whose movements were slow, but whose eyes held the chilling glint of honed steel, offered a confident smile. It was the smile of a puppet master who had already pulled the final string. In the privileged row behind, Evelyn and Abigail, poised and elegant, whispered like conspirators, their sidelong glances daggers dipped in animosity. Their animosity was a palpable force, pressing down on me, yet I forced my breath to even, a silent mantra. This isn't my battle, it's Emily's. Then I saw Jake. He sat in the spectator section, a solid anchor in his police uniform. His slight nod, his steady, unwavering gaze, was a silent promise. He would not abandon us. In that moment, surrounded by a suffocating storm, his presence was a lifeline. I returned his nod, a silent thanks reaching back to that terrifying Christmas Eve and stretching to this bitter day. The trial began. Mr. James, our lawyer, stood, his voice a calm tide against the brewing storm. He laid out the evidence, a cascade of bank transfers, clear proof of my unwavering support for Emily, a river of money that, in his quiet words, had mostly flowed into Ryan's coffers. Then came Emily's medical records, a stark chronicle of depression, detailed notes from her therapist painting a desolate landscape. 4 miscarriages and a ceaseless barrage of cruelty from her husband's family had not merely wounded Emily physically, Mr. James declared, his voice thick with a raw emotion that resonated through the room. They had utterly destroyed her spirit, treating her as an unwelcome stranger in her own home. I watched Emily, her head still bowed, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were ghost white, as if she were trying to contain a pain too vast to hold. A desperate urge to reach for her, to pull her into my arms, surged through me. But I knew I had to hold firm, to let the legal labyrinth take its course. Then, from the opposing counsel, 2 young lawyers from the Whitlock's camp rose, the air instantly curdling with a sense of brewing injustice. One, in a sleek black suit, his voice a commanding whip, began, Emily is merely feigning illness, seeking coddling. The Whitlock family provided her with everything: shelter, food, every need met, yet she failed her part. She failed as a wife. Each word was a physical blow. Feigning, coddled, failed. My fist clenched, the hot pulse of anger thrumming a dangerous rhythm in my veins. They called their first witness, Mrs. Martha, the Whitlock's former housekeeper. She took the stand, her eyes darting nervously, her voice a reedy whisper. Mrs. Harper was lazy, she accused, then lowered her gaze. She'd lock herself in her room all day, neglecting the house. I had to do everything, cooking, cleaning. Disbelief seized me, the same Emily who had lovingly prepared every meal, who had baked homemade pies to sweeten their ungrateful palates, now branded a shirker. I shot to my feet, my voice ripping through the silence. You're lying. Emily was never like that. The judge, a middle-aged man whose face was etched with stern indifference, slammed his gavel. Silence, please. This is a courtroom. I sank back, my heart a trapped bird, breath searing my lungs. I risked a glance at Mr. Harold Whitlock. A ghost of a smile flitted across his lips, a subtle, smug acknowledgement of the judge. An invisible thread, cold and sinister, seemed to stretch between them, chilling me to the bone. A truth, unvoiced but undeniable, settled in my gut. This is rigged. They had orchestrated this day, and we were but pawns in their cruel game. Emily remained hunched, her trembling hands gripping the chair's edge as if clinging to a precipice. In the back, Jake's jaw was clenched, his fists tight, a silent testament to a barely contained fury. Mr. James, our lawyer, pressed on, his voice a steady counterpoint to the mounting tension. We wish to present key evidence, a recording from Christmas Eve, capturing the Whitlock family's psychological abuse and venomous insults toward Emily. He played the audio Jake had secretly recorded. Ryan's voice boomed, cold and contemptuous. She's just faking depression to dodge her duties. Then Evelyn's, cutting and precise. A woman who can't have kids, even if she eats well, is useless. And Abigail's, laced with sickly sweetness. She can't even manage to give birth. The courtroom fell into a stunned silence, broken only by the faint rustle of whispers. I watched Emily, her shoulders shrinking, as if those brutal words were fresh blades tracing old wounds. But the Whitlock's lawyer was on his feet, objecting, his voice sharp and confident. That recording is illegal, made without consent. It violates privacy rights. The judge nodded, his voice as dry as parchment. The recording is inadmissible. The world tilted. The ground beneath me seemed to fissure, and I gripped the chair, desperate to keep from spiraling into the abyss. The recording, the most damning evidence of the Whitlock's cruelty, vanished, discarded on a mere technicality. Murmurs swelled, some gasping in disbelief, others shaking their heads, bewildered. Jake's head was bowed, his fists still trembling on his knees. Emily buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking, fighting back tears that threatened to consume her. A primal scream clawed at my throat, a desperate urge to rush the bench, to demand the justice that was being systematically denied. But I knew with a sickening certainty that in this room, justice was not on our side. Mr. Harold sat, placid and arrogant, as if this outcome had been a foregone conclusion, a meticulously planned denouement. I squeezed Emily's hand, a desperate transfer of strength, even as my own resolve crumbled. After a week of grueling, soul-crushing days, the final verdict arrived. I sat in the hushed Boise courthouse, Emily's cold, trembling fingers clasped in mine. All week, I had steeled myself, but each night in the quiet solitude of my small apartment, anguish and helplessness clawed at my heart. Beside me, Emily's swollen eyelids were a roadmap of sleepless agony, her face a pale spectral mask, as if life itself had been siphoned from her. My grip tightened on her hand, a silent plea for courage that I too desperately needed. Ryan strode in, adjusting his tie with an air of practiced nonchalance, as if this were merely another day at the office. Evelyn, his mother, smoothed her dress, her lips painted a defiant crimson, a triumphant smile hinting at a preordained victory. Abigail, draped in a flashy ensemble, shot us a dismissive glare. Mr. Harold stood behind Ryan, a towering, ominous presence, his gaze hard, a chilling reminder that the Whitlock family always held the reins. Jake, still in his police uniform, occupied the spectator section. His eyes, though steady, could not quite conceal the shadow of his worry. He offered a slight nod, a silent vow of unwavering support. I met his gaze, gratitude blooming despite the chill air. But when the judge, a middle-aged man with a face as impassive as stone, entered, a shiver traced its way down my spine. The air grew heavy, thick with the unspoken weight of an impending, inevitable decree. The judge spoke, his voice clipped and dry. The court grants the divorce request of the plaintiff, Emily Harper Larson, and the defendant, Ryan Whitlock. A fragile ray of hope pierced the gloom. Emily's shoulders began to tremble, silent tears tracing paths down her pale cheeks. I squeezed her hand, urging her to find calm, to listen. A divorce. This was what I had prayed for, Emily's escape from the Whitlocks' gilded cage. But I knew, with a sinking dread, that this wasn't the end. The judge continued, his voice droning, a flat recitation. However, the court does not recognize the claims of domestic abuse due to insufficient legal evidence. As for assets, since Ryan Whitlock contributed more to the marriage's upkeep, the court awards him the majority of shared property. Each word was a hammer blow to my chest. I froze, breath constricting in my throat. No recognition of domestic abuse, insufficient evidence. My mind replayed the Christmas Eve recording, Ryan, Evelyn, Abigail's cruel words cast aside as a mere technicality. I pictured Emily's medical records, the bank receipts, all twisted and distorted by the Whitlocks' lawyers until they became weapons against us. Then, with a sickening clarity, it hit me. Mr. Harold, with his past as a judge and his deep, insidious ties within the judicial system, had rigged it. I looked at him. He tilted his head slightly, that same smug smile, a grotesque masterpiece on his lips. It was all fixed. They had manipulated the ruling, and Emily and I were merely pawns in a game we could never win. I couldn't hold it back any longer. I shot to my feet, my voice tearing through the courtroom, choked with a raw blend of rage and despair. This is so unfair. This isn't justice. My shout echoed, silencing the room. Emily clutched my hand, her eyes wide with panic, but I couldn't stop. You saw how they treated my daughter. You heard what she endured, and you still dare to say there was no abuse? You dare to take everything from her? A guard materialized, his voice firm. Ma'am, please sit down, or I'll have to ask you to leave. I glared at him, then at the judge, who sat impassive, as if my words were nothing more than a buzzing fly. I sank back into the chair, my hands trembling, feeling the world crumble beneath me. Ryan turned, his eyes locking with mine, a mocking smile twisting his lips as he adjusted his tie, celebrating a hollow victory. Evelyn and Abigail nudged each other, their muffled giggles a fresh knife in my heart. Mr. Harold nodded slowly, his gaze calm, as if this were just another string he'd pulled. I looked at them, one by one, my blood boiling. They hadn't just stolen Emily's justice, they had stolen my faith in a system I once believed was fair. Emily covered her face with her hands, her body shaking, her muffled sobs tearing me apart. I wanted to hold her, to whisper words of comfort, but my throat was a stone, and words felt utterly useless against such pain. The judge's words echoed in my head, a lingering sentence not just for Emily, but for me. In the back, Jake stood abruptly, his gaze burning into the Whitlocks. I saw the veins bulge in his arms, his fists clenched, as if he wrestled internally with a storm of furious rage. I signaled him to stay calm, even though I wanted to scream, to break everything in that sterile room. The judge slammed his gavel, his voice sharp and final. Order! The session is over. Everyone may leave. The gavel's crack was a period, but for me, it was the beginning of a fresh, brutal pain. People began to rise, the room filling with murmurs and the rustle of papers. But I remained, holding Emily tightly, her trembling shoulders and broken sobs shattering me from the inside out. I longed to comfort her, but my throat closed, words useless against this profound agony. The unjust ruling hadn't merely stripped Emily of assets. It had ripped away the last shred of my belief that the system would ever truly protect her. Ryan sauntered past, his posture radiating a smug triumph, as if he had won an honorable war. See, Rose? His whisper, wet against my ear, was a serpent's hiss. I told you, don't fight me. You're just a useless old woman. Ryan's smile gleamed, a crooked scar of triumph across his face, his eyes like polished stones as he turned to leave, as if Emily and I were already forgotten dust. Gasoline. That was his voice in the fire of my rage. Blood surged, a hot tide through my veins. My fist clenched until the bones screamed, every muscle taut, a drawn bowstring humming with violent intent. I wanted to launch myself across the space separating us, to wipe that arrogant smirk from his face, to make him pay for every tear Emily had shed. Years as a taekwondo coach had forged a restraint of iron in me, but in that moment, the iron buckled, then shattered. One step, my heart hammered, a drumbeat of pure, unadulterated fury. I was ready to do something irreversible. Then Jake was there, a sudden solid wall before me, eyes blazing with a mirroring fire. His lips were a tight, thin line, his fist clenched, a mirror image of my own lethal intent. He was ready to unleash his fury on Ryan. The courtroom, a moment ago a hushed mausoleum, buzzed to life. Voices rose like a sudden swarm of angry bees. Are they gonna fight? A cop throwing punches in court? Phones appeared, tiny screens flickering, camera flashes popping like distant thunder. A journalist in the corner, a predator scenting blood, raised his camera, eyes hungry for the scandal. Ryan faltered, startled, but only for a fraction of a second. His defiance snapped back into place, a mask of cold disdain. He smirked. Go ahead, hit me. I'll make sure you lose everything. Who do you think you are? Just a low-life cop. He moved closer, a serpent charming a bird, certain Jake wouldn't dare. Jake's fist trembled, a barely controlled earthquake. His breath hitched, ragged and raw, eyes rimmed with red. I knew the precipice he stood on. One wrong move, and everything would be lost. A choked sob, and then Emily, my sweet daughter, tore free from my grasp. She launched herself at Jake, clinging to his arm, her small body racked with tremors. No, please don't do it, she begged, her voice splintered into 1,000 pieces. I don't want you or Mom to become violent like him. I just want peace. I just want to keep living. Her cry ripped through the charged air, a fragile sound that silenced the roar of the room. Tears streamed down her face, glistening in the harsh courtroom light, her thin hands gripping Jake as if he were her last anchor in a raging storm. Jake froze, suspended between rage and reason. His furious eyes, red-hot a moment before, slowly dimmed. His fist, rigid as stone, trembled, then slowly, agonizingly, loosened its grip, falling to his side. He bowed his head, lips pressed tight, fighting a war only he could see, struggling to contain the inferno consuming him. Camera clicks, sharp and relentless, echoed in the sudden quiet. Flashes captured the poignant tableau. Emily, small and broken, clinging to Jake, while Ryan stood opposite, a dark silhouette of smug triumph. A soft murmur of crying began to spread through the room, like wildflowers after a rain. Those who had come to witness, perhaps unaware of the case's brutal contours, found themselves weeping, pierced by Emily's raw, unvarnished pain. I saw a woman wiping her eyes, a man shaking his head in silent sorrow, but the Whitlocks remained unmoved. Evelyn and Abigail whispered, their cold smiles like slivers of ice. Mr. Harold, ramrod straight, nodded slightly, his authoritative air untouched, as if this raw human drama was merely a minor inconvenience in his perfectly ordered world. The judge's gavel slammed, a crack of thunder that shattered the spell. Order! His voice was a frigid whip. If this disruption continues, I'll have guards clear the room. The gavel's echo hung in the air, a stark warning, yanking everyone back to the brutal reality of the courtroom. I stepped forward, gathered Emily into my arms, hugging her tightly. Her body still trembled, a lost child caught in a blizzard. Jake stood beside us, his head bowed, lips still tight, a silent accusation against himself for not doing more. I reached out, a gentle hand on his shoulder, a silent message. I understand. Thank you. Ryan adjusted his tie, his gaze sweeping the room like a conqueror, then walked away, his steps heavy with triumph. Evelyn and Abigail followed, their cold laughter thin and brittle, another knife twisting in my chest. Slowly, the room emptied, leaving just the three of us in the cavernous space, three souls bound by a bitter lump in our throats. I hugged Emily tighter, feeling her shallow breathing against my shoulder. "Mom," she whispered, her voice barely a thread. "I don't want to fight anymore. I'm tired. Can we just go home?" Her words tore at something deep inside me. I wanted to tell her it would be okay, that I would keep fighting, but my throat closed, choked with unshed tears. No words came. I led her out, Jake walking silently beside us, his gaze steady, a quiet sentinel. The faint Boise sunlight streamed through the courthouse windows, but its warmth could not reach my heart. Today's ruling wasn't just a loss, it was a declaration of war. The Whitlocks may have won in court, but I swore to myself they would not win in Emily's life. I looked at her, her red-rimmed eyes holding a tiny, fragile spark, a flicker of hope. For that spark, I would never give up. In the days that followed, Boise seemed to stir. Local news broadcasts began to hum with an unexpected resonance. Bold headlines slapped across front pages. Whitlock trial, justice bought. My heart pounded reading those words. They voiced a pain that Emily and I had carried in silence. Then, a video of Emily clinging to Jake in the courtroom, her small, desperate plea for peace, went viral. The raw honesty of her anguish, her broken voice begging Jake not to mirror Ryan's violence, touched countless hearts. Comments flooded social media. The Whitlocks think they can control everything. Emily deserves better than this. Sitting in our small apartment, bathed in sympathetic lamplight, I found a strange comfort. Though the court had turned its back, the community's voice was now rising, a chorus in Emily's defense. The Whitlocks, despite their legal victory, began to feel the cost. Whispers followed Mr. Harold, his old colleagues speaking of influence peddled and justice bent. Ryan, now dubbed the lawyer of injustice, faced a barrage of online criticism. The family prestige, once an unyielding fortress, began to crumble like a sandcastle against an relentless tide. I took no joy in their suffering, but a sliver of justice, born not from the courts, but from the people's collective conscience, settled in my heart. Emily moved in with me. Our apartment, lit by the warm glow of lamps, its walls adorned with family photos, became our sanctuary. Each morning, I rose early to make her breakfast, sometimes maple syrup pancakes, sometimes scrambled eggs with toast. Emily would sit slowly at the table, cradling a mug of hot tea, her gaze fixed on the faint sunlight slipping between Boise's rooftops. Some days, I'd see silent tears roll down her cheeks, like sorrow's quiet rain. But slowly, imperceptibly, Emily began to heal. Day by day, she spoke a little more, her eyes a little less empty. I didn't push her. I just stayed by her side, a mother ready to shield her daughter from any storm. Jake became a vital thread in the new fabric of our lives. He'd stop by, sometimes with a small bouquet of poinsettias, other times with a bag of donuts from the corner bakery. Each visit sparked a flicker in Emily, his presence a quiet medicine for her bruised soul. One afternoon, a nervous flutter in his hands, Jake gave Emily a small box. Inside lay a keychain, a miniature taekwondo uniform, the same symbol from the studio where I'd taught him and so many others. "You don't have to be strong right away," he said, his voice soft but firm, "but you can start over, little by little, just like Ms. Rose always taught us." Emily held the keychain, her eyes shining with unshed emotion. She pressed her lips together, held back a sob, then nodded slowly. "Thank you," she whispered, small but overflowing with feeling. I watched from a distance, my own heart swelling, a weight lifting from my chest. For years, Emily had been belittled, called useless. Now, someone saw her true worth, valued her not for what she could do, but for who she was. I turned away, swiping a tear, not wanting her to see my own vulnerability. One evening, as the setting sun bathed the apartment in a golden hue, Emily sat across from Jake on the couch, her head bowed, hands twisting the edge of her sweater, her voice barely a whisper. "Jake," she began, "I might never be able to have kids, if that disappoints you." She trailed off, as if the words themselves might shatter everything. I was in the kitchen, pretending to wash dishes, but my heart stopped, frozen, waiting for Jake's reply. He smiled then, a warm, steady light in his eyes. He took her trembling hands, looked deep into her searching gaze. "I don't need that, Emily. You're already my family." Those words were a gust of warm wind, melting the lingering cold deep in my chest. I heard them, my throat thick with unshed tears, my vision blurring. For years, Emily had been shamed, treated as a failed wife for her perceived inadequacy. Now, someone told her she was enough, that she deserved love just for being herself. I turned my face away, letting silent tears fall, a gratitude too vast for words filling my heart. Easter arrived, and I took Emily's hand, walking her through Boise's main square, just like when she was a little girl, skipping down brightly lit streets. The square buzzed with children's laughter and the sweet scent of fresh-baked pies from food stalls. Emily wore a light sweater, her hair tied back, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw her smile, a radiant spring sun smile. "Mom," she said softly, her voice wistful, "I miss these days. I miss when you taught me to make apple pie, when you told me about your taekwondo matches." I squeezed her hand. "I miss them too, sweetheart, and I'll always be here to make more memories with you." As we sat on a wooden bench, watching children play by the fountain, a simple, profound truth settled within me. Justice in courtrooms can be twisted, bought by power and money, but the justice of the heart love, respect, resilience that no one can touch. Emily, though she had lost so much, was finding herself again day by day, step by painful step. And I, a mother who once felt utterly powerless, now knew my greatest strength wasn't in punches thrown in the ring, but in the fierce, unyielding love I held for my daughter. Jake appeared, a bag of warm churros in his hand. He offered one to Emily, and they laughed, easy and familiar, like old friends. I watched them, my heart full of a quiet, abiding hope. Emily might never forget the scars the Whitlocks had left, but she was learning to move forward, to love herself, to open her heart to those who truly valued her. And at 65, after fighting so many battles, I knew the fight for Emily's happiness was the most meaningful of all. And as the final frame fades, 2 hidden pathways await. I've placed direct links for you to step into the channel's most cherished narrative stories that will surprise you, I promise, long after this one ends. Thanks for staying until the end, folks. Here's a little something for making it all the way through this epic journey.